G'day, welcome to More Cowbell, Please. I'm Ainsley, your host. This week, we are talking to Matt Hammitt, a singer, a songwriter, speaker, former frontman of the band Sanctus Real. He was with Sanctus Real since the beginning in '96, wrote some of the big songs like Lead Me and I'm Not Alright. Actually, it ties back to a previous episode we did with Chris Stevens. Chris produced some of the big hits for Sanctus Real, and I've actually mixed some of them as well, so we've got a bit of a family tie in there. Anyway, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. I really enjoy Matt's perspective on so many things. He recently did a reel that went pretty viral on the Tait situation, and I really liked what he had to say, so I thought this is a great place for him to come and have a conversation and for you to enjoy. Don't forget, we've got episodes coming out every Thursday. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any. I've got some amazing guests coming down the pipe, great conversations that I think you're really going to enjoy. Hey, if you see or hear things you like on the podcast, please consider sharing them so that your friends and your social followers can enjoy it as well. All right, without any further ado, here we go. This is Matt Hammitt. Welcome to More Cowbell, Please.
I love it.
That's the way I get going.
I love it.
I'm going to read, and it's kind of the way I've been starting my podcast, AI bio.
I'll take it.
So usually it's about 80% correct. It's the 20% that's kind of funny. That's not correct. And I'm going to put on my
What if the parts you think are funny end up being correct, you know?
Let's just go there when we get there. So Matt Hammitt is an American singer, songwriter, author, and speaker. Best known as the lead singer and primary songwriter of Christian rock band Sanctus Real from 96 to 2015.
Yeah.
So you've been out of that for that long.
Yeah, my last show I think was February 2016.
Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Born 1979 in Ohio, you co-founded it with Chris Roman while you're in high school.
Yeah.
The band released 8 studio albums with Sparrow, including We Need Each Other 2008, Piece of Real Heart 2010, and Grammy nominated, and produced 14 top 5 and 6 number 1 singles on Christian radio, Lead Me, Forgiven, I'm Not Alright. Hammitt's songwriting extends to artists like For King and Country, we're circling back to that, Francesca Battistelli and Jamie Grace, earning him 3 double awards and multiple CSAC ASCAP awards for chart performance. In 2015, Hammitt left Sanctus Real to prioritize family, particularly after his son Bowen's diagnosis with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, a serious congenital heart defect requiring multiple surgeries. I haven't read this, so those big words were just,
Yeah.
I'm going to give myself a check mark on that. This experience detailed in the 2022 documentary Bowen's Heart, inspired Hammitt to focus on faith, marriage, fatherhood. He and his wife Sarah, married since 2001, have 4 children, Emmy, Claire, Bowen, and Lewis. Post Sanctus Real, Hammitt launched the Lead Me Lifecast podcast and Lead Me Live conferences, emphasizing on faith and family, and joined Family Life as a speaker for events like Kirk Cameron's Living Room Reset. His 2020 book, Lead Me, Finding Courage to Fight for Your Marriage, Children and Faith, candidly explores his struggles balancing music and family with contributions from Sarah. As a solo artist, Hammitt released Every Falling Tear in 2011. So you did that before?
I did my first solo album, before I left the band.
Huh.
Because it coincided, I wrote a batch of songs that coincided with my son's diagnosis.
And a self-titled album in 2017 with Full Circle, his 2021 single Church Hurt, and its accompanying devotional address, Healing from Church-Related Pain. Recently, on June 23, 2025, Hammitt defended CCM industry amid allegations against Michael Tait, emphasizing the integrity of most artists he's known over 25 years. An Ohio native now based in Nashville, Hammitt continues to inspire through music, speaking, and advocacy for family and faith.
Yeah.
Seems like they got it all right.
I think they got it all right. The thing that's hilarious is that it emphasized my post that I did. That's so crazy. It pulled that. That's hilarious.
I like to get to know
Yeah.
where you came from, your upbringing, what led you into music,
Yeah.
and gave you the audacity to think you'd be a lead singer
Yeah.
and a songwriter.
In 1996, I met Chris Roman at Toledo Christian High School in Toledo, where I grew up. And he was just sitting at, I think, a a table in the cafeteria, playing his guitar. He was learning Wildflowers by Tom Petty for a girl that he liked. He was like, hey man, would you want to sing this? Because I don't really sing very well. And it was fun. It was like just fun high school stuff,
Right.
So basically we started just singing together, and it evolved into, hey, do you want to cover some songs? And we ended up in his parents' basement with our drummer Mark, who ended up shortly after joining the band. And we kind of had a few iterations of the band and different names. And in I guess November '96 landed on Sanctus Real, which, it's kind of a funny story because our drummer Mark basically came in and just said, hey, there's this word Sanctus. And the funny thing is that just being a bunch of American high school kids, we didn't know. Technically, like in the Catholic Church, they would say Sanctus, and so the Latin pronunciation of it was just over our heads. So he said, it means holy, set apart. And we were like, cool. And then we had a guitar player at the time who was with us for a very short period. And he just said, let's put real on it. And that was kind of it. It was like, okay, Sanctus Real, here we are, let's do it. Having no idea that this thing would actually become something. I actually had, in one of the early iterations of our group, I actually wasn't the singer, I was the drummer. And the singer left, and they said, well, would you sing? And so I tried to sing, and that's kind of how I became the singer of the band as it became Sanctus Real. So I definitely never set out to be a lead singer, but I loved songwriting. And because I loved songwriting and I was writing some of those songs that we sang, obviously I had to sing them for everybody, and they realized I had a voice. So that's kind of how that all came about.
Oh, so the singing came about by accident, but the whole music thing,
Yeah.
I mean, did you feel like that was where you were headed at any point earlier in life? Or did that just accidentally happen in high school?
I just heard my brother learning early Christian music songs. Like he was learning songs from like Andre Crouch, and then he was learning old Petra songs like from the Beyond Belief record. And he got a guitar and just started learning how to play them. And I would hear him across the hall in his bedroom playing these songs. And I started going, hey, can you teach me those chords? And once I learned how to play a few chords, I realized very quickly I just found myself wanting to just sing my own melodies and lyrics over top of those chords. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about like being a songwriter. It just kind of is what I just loved to do. And then pretty quickly realized like, oh, I can write songs. And started presenting them to my friends. And so, there wasn't really, before I was probably 15, or maybe I was 14 at the time, but before that age, I had never thought that I would in any way, shape, or form sing or write music or anything like that.
Do you remember anybody giving you specific encouragement? Go, hey, you can do this. You're good.
Yeah. I think it was really my youth pastor at church who started giving me a platform. Even before I was in the band, started giving me a platform to sing some worship, and kind of as the band was taking off locally, and we were doing more kind of regional shows and whatnot, those opportunities got bigger for me to be able to lead worship at my church. And it became apparent that whether or not I felt it at the beginning, people affirmed for sure. I would say my parents and my youth pastor both were huge voices in that, just affirming that I had a gift to be able to draw people in through song, whether it was worship or with my own song, or be able to be in front of people and somehow connect with people. And so I just leaned into it from that encouragement.
So you went to a Christian school. I'm curious about, this is a little rabbit hole I've been going down recently, is the theological education or kind of basis.
Yeah.
Christian artists, the moment they're put on stage, it's assumed there's some pastoral or ministry content coming from that person into the Christian world.
Being raised in church at a Christian school where I actually had a biblical worldview taught to me, I think I naturally approached my songwriting from that lens. To me, it felt very second nature. And even when we first started writing music, like our influences were like Foo Fighter and Weezer, and those were the songs we were covering for bands like that, Jimmy Eat World, these rock bands that we loved, and or Radiohead even. And so even as I would write songs sometimes that didn't have like bold lyrical, spiritual overtones, I think naturally I never really wanted to say anything that went against my faith. even now I have a band called Low Cloud that Usher playing a music festival this weekend up near Urbana, Champaign, Illinois. Those songs aren't like on the nose Christian songs, but everything has always been from then until now from a biblical worldview. That's something that's always been important to me, but it's become abundantly clear to me over the course of time that that's not necessarily the case for all Christian artists, that some people are just stumbling into faith. Absolutely wonderful, right? Not stumbling into it. Obviously, the Lord was after their heart. He's pulling them into the faith journey. And maybe they have no background at all of any biblical worldview training or theology. And they're just like, man, I love God. I love music. And here we go. And people then do expect those people to have some sort of pastoral wisdom, like you're saying. And that's just not always the case. And I don't judge them for that. I think it's wonderful that they're singing for the Lord, and hopefully they have people along the way who help guide that process for them. It is interesting, though, that, yeah, people kind of expect artists to be pastors.
But I mean, think about it in mainstream also.
Yeah.
You know, political views.
Totally,
or,
yes.
You know, all kinds of things are expressed from the stage that they have no necessarily qualification in.
Yes, exactly.
So, but they're just talking their story from where they're at. You know, people look up to pop icons as though they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They've got their lives together.
Exactly. In 2010, we were putting our 5th record with Sparrow. And at that time, we had started having kind of some of the radio success. That was actually the first time that we had a #1 single at AC Christian radio. So like the main format, right? The main contemporary format. So we had a lot of success kind of in the rock charts and CHR at the time, which no longer exists, which you remember, you mixed a lot for CHR. Yeah, you've mixed a ton of songs that were CHR hits. You've mixed some of our music. It was interesting making that shift into growing as a band and finally accomplishing some things that maybe we thought as a rock band we wouldn't accomplish, like having a #1 song on the contemporary chart. I mean, we just didn't see that as part of our path necessarily. But when that happened at the exact same time, within months, my wife and I went into the doctor's office for a 20-week ultrasound and found out that our 3rd baby had this severe heart disease, life-altering heart disease. And so they told us, in essence, he had half of a heart. We didn't know what that meant. You know, we were like, how does a kid have half a heart and survive? So that kind of started us on this whole journey of figuring out, you know, what life was going to look like with him. And I think that was probably where the greatest tension between like my career dreams and my family dreams started to really, that's where I really started feeling it in a real way. I've got my wife, who's 2 kids, a new baby that's going to be sick, going to require open heart surgeries, but yet our career is like taking off in ways that we'd always wanted it. It should have been like the peak of excitement for what was happening with the band. But yeah, I was in the most difficult season of my life. I was in the hospital for a total of 4 months over the course of a year. My heart was just really torn. And I wanted to be so grateful for the success and all the tours we were getting and all the album sales and all the accolades. That's all great. But man, my kid was dying. It was a real kind of mix of worlds there for me. I think that was the point where I started thinking, can I be the best husband and father that I can be if I'm touring like this? That's where those questions started really coming to the top for me. I'd always kind of had that tension. You know, as a dad and a husband, you're traveling so much. Yeah. You got to navigate. Is this really my calling? Am I supposed to be doing this? But yeah, it really was emphasized during that time. And then over the next few years, especially as a song called Lead Me was our big song, which was about being a more present husband and father. I'm up there singing. I can remember Winter Jam, singing in front of 10,000 or more people every single night. The interesting thing about Winter Jam is that, you know, not everybody's there to see any one band, right? It's like 10 bands, but they know all the hit songs. We'd sing Lead Me, and every voice in that arena was singing at the top of their lungs back to me. And there was something about that song, about my words, about wanting to be a more present husband and father, being sung back to me, that really affected me. It's kind of ironic, really, that the song about being more present took me away from home even more. those words being sung back to me is really a big part of the catalyst that brought me home. So in 2015, I told the band at the very beginning of that year that I would do one more year. It's really hard. Had been best friends and bandmates for 20 years. And so that was a pivotal moment for me. Very difficult to sit down with them and tell them that news. And so we did one more year of touring. And my highest priority at that point was to try to help them prepare however we needed to prepare business-wise for a season of them trying to pursue looking for they wanted to go on, they wanted to find a new singer, and so I wanted to do my best to help them prepare for that.
I don't remember seeing you guys.
Yeah.
But you weren't playing or anything, you were just singing?
Well, I play guitar.
Yeah, okay.
But we had 2 guitar players in the band. I would also play some electric, some acoustic, but my guitar playing was never a feature of the band.
So they just needed a vocalist.
They needed a vocalist, really. And I'd over the years, become more and more of a front man and played less and less. So, yeah. So it took them a little while, but they found somebody and they continued on and they had some success with some of the songs they released and they're still out there doing their thing. And my life has been kind of one year, one step at a time of just trying to say yes to what I feel God opened the door to. It's kind of interesting. I went from kind of my whole year being planned for me, and our agents and managers would say, "Here you go. Like, this is what your year looks like. This is the tours we're going to be on. This is and we had some saying it, of course, but it was like more or less mapped out for us, right? To basically having no clue what was next and just living moment to moment and opportunity by opportunity. And I'm still living that way. The Lord's always provided what I need. I know He'll continue to do that. But there are times that's a little scary.
I'm right there.
Yeah.
It's been this whole year. It's been, okay, we're going to step into faith.
Yeah.
We're going to just see what happens.
Yeah.
I had Chris on here. Chris Stevens.
Yeah.
And that was fun. The song I'm Not All Right. I want to hear your take on the song.
Yeah. The song Not All Right was, I guess, birthed. It came out of a couple riffs that Chris had written. We wrote it originally kind of as this sugar-coated version of the more difficult parts of our faith journey. The funny part about that song is when we first came in, my lyric said something like, "I'll be fine," or "I'll be all right," or whatever. Like, it was kind of the positive spin on it. Like, hey, we're going through some hard stuff, but I'll be all right. I remember sitting around the piano with Chris Stevens, and he just started like kind of changing up the chord structures a little bit. He was like, there's something about that I'll be fine, or whatever the lyric was. And he said, you guys are going through a lot of stuff right now. What if you just didn't say it's all right, And like, and it was really him kind of like saying, what if you guys are just honest? That led to the moment around his piano, as I remember it, of us just saying, yeah, what if we do say I'm not all right? We started singing and writing. And so he was a major part of moving that song into what it is. It was his encouragement for us to just say what maybe we thought couldn't be said or shouldn't be said at the time. Because there was still that feeling, I think, that in Christian music at the time, I do think there was still that feeling that there were certain things maybe we should or shouldn't say. Maybe the audience just wants everything to be from a positive point of view. The kind of the positive uplifting thing. And I don't know, it was crazy because it felt so freeing for us in that moment to sing that song, write that song, and record it with just that driving, raw vocal singing those words. I'm not all right, I'm broken inside. And it still had the twist, that's why I need you. So it led us to a really uplifting place in the song. So it still was a positive song, but I think that heart cry, it was obviously the thing that made the song and made it what it was, and was the reason that people really grasped onto that song the first time that we had ever seen in our career in such a powerful way.
And that wasn't your first hit.
No, we had some other songs before that had done well. Right. But I'm Not All Right was a deeper sense that we were going to be a band that was going to not just talk about more real issues, but sing about our faith from a standpoint of honesty.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, I met you one time. I don't know if you remember this.
I remember meeting you before. Yeah.
Yeah, it was,
When was that?
I think it was probably Halloween
Okay.
or something, walking around, and Scott McIntyre was in town at Randy Jocelyn's house.
Okay.
And we were all walking around the neighborhood together. That's the memory I have.
Yeah. Yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because, like, with you having mixed some of our music, it's like you feel like you know people sometimes and you don't even really know them just because
Right.
you've worked in some proximity. But yeah, I do remember that.
So I had mixed several Matt Redman records. No, many records for Nathan Knuckles.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 before I ever met him.
No way.
Yeah. And it's before FaceTime or any of those kinds of things. It's all phone calls, and texting was just coming in.
Yeah.
So I worked for tons of people I never met.
Were you working in Australia doing mixing, or you were here?
No,
right?
I've been here since 2000.
I didn't know if you had started out over mixing there, but
not for America.
Not for
I was
America,
doing
yeah.
Australian music business. Yeah. I worked for the Small Bones in the 80s and the 90s.
Wow. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, as a concert promoter, and I had a recording studio, and I've been in the music. I left school at age 15.
No way.
All I've done is music.
Since we were talking about the Sanctus Real days.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned Australia. Some of my favorite memories are from Easterfest and Toowoomba.
Oh, right.
And my most embarrassing story.
Please tell me.
Is at Easterfest. And it's a great story. First time in Australia. We were so excited to be there. Like I love international travel, and I had always wanted to go there. I hadn't been. So this is our first time ever performing and ever visiting Australia. So we were playing with Reliant K at Easterfest that night. And so when we go on, I had no idea if people would even know our music. And at that time, I guess our music had gotten some decent exposure with Christian music fans in Australia. And so people knew our songs, and I was so excited because I just thought they may not know anything about us, And so I was just having the time of my life. It was such a fun concert. People were so engaged. And at one point during the concert, I jumped off the stage and started walking through the crowd and was just hugging people, high-fiving people, having the time of my life. I'm like, this is great. So at some point I turned around and realized that the Easterfest stage was quite high off the ground, and it was up on scaffolding. And I started realizing, like, I'm not sure how I'm going to get back up on stage. So I end up running around to the side of the stage, and I basically was able to kind of shimmy my way up the scaffolding. I remember my footing was very wide, so I had to reach my feet very wide to get up. And
where are we headed here?
So I finally get up, get my guitar on. I'm a little out of breath. I'm about to start the next song, but I made it in time. And then all of a sudden, there's a small group of people in the front start chanting. And they're chanting 3 words with their fists in the air. And then it starts just spreading all the way to the back of the crowd till, I think they had like 8,000 to 10,000 people maybe there. Mm-hmm. And till all the entire crowd is chanting 3 words with their fists in the air. I can't understand what they're saying just because all the noise. And one of the security guards down at the bottom of the stage starts waving up to me because I'm about to go on the next song. And he says, mate, and I can't do the Australian accent, so I won't even try. But he basically says, you know what they're chanting? And I'm like, what? He says, the crowd is chanting, zip your fly, zip your fly. So I was on the Jumbotrons. When I had climbed up the stage, it had worked my zipper down on my pants, and my zipper was wide open on the Jumbotron. We laughed about it. It went on. It was funny moment, but technically that was a very embarrassing moment to have 10,000 people chanting "Zip your fly."
Excellent. Well, I've got 2 or 3 shorts already because I love making the shorts. Tell me about your songwriting. It mentioned the For King and Country, right? Tell me about that.
That sounds way cooler than it is, because I did a decent amount of writing with the band early on with Seth Mosley. But what's funny is the only cut I got was on their Christmas record. It was the original song, Into the Silent Night, on their Christmas record. And so it's funny because it'll pull that up and say For King and Country. Boy, I wish I had written some of the hits,
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, they're great friends. We did a lot of touring with them in the early years. They're one of their original touring guitar players. Actually met his wife at one of our
Oh yeah,
shows.
who was that?
Mark Campbell, yeah. So Mark met his wife at one of our shows. Guys, I actually met those guys when they were on tour with Rebecca. Back in the day, I was just a young kid helping load in their truck. Back
Oh,
when they were kids and just
yeah.
helping out. And they, I remember Joel and the brothers directing traffic and volunteers just when they were teenagers, and I was just
Mm-hmm.
another teenager just helping load in at my church. With songwriting, yeah, it's been interesting. I've been writing a ton since probably like 2012, 2013. Seth Mosley actually had co-written some songs, and he started pulling me into some other songwriting sessions. And one of the songs that I had brought in that we wrote with Hawk Nelson was called Words, which became their first
Mm.
number one song after their original singer left. So when Jonathan was singing. And so that kind of sparked a writing relationship with me and Seth, and him pulling me into some things, and really started giving me more courage to step in outside of writing for the band and writing for other people. And so I've continued to do that. This past year, I co-wrote a song with an artist named Terrian.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, We Just Need Jesus was the name of the song that did really well for her. And kind of fun to still see these songs every once in a while come up. It's still very exciting for me to hear your song, hear your song, not just you've sung, but you've written on the radio or see it performed live. There's still a thrill to me
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
That's different than when I've written it and performed it myself.
So are your weeks looking like writing appointments?
So it's interesting. I just signed a new deal with EMAC,
Okay.
and I signed as an artist with Goatee as well. So I'm doing both with them. Feel like at one point there was so much cross pollination that was happening just in the creative space with writing and production and all that. It does feel like we're in a season where people have kind of embraced their own camps of people. And there still is times that obviously we'll write with different artists or different writers from different publishing companies, different labels. That still happens, but it doesn't seem that it's quite as much as it used to be. I guess when I was writing for Seth Mosley in 2016, 2017, when we were just starting out, it was like I could be writing 4 days out of the week with different artists, sometimes 2 days. And now, I'm writing like once every couple weeks, it seems like. But that's also partly because of my schedule. I'm doing a lot of speaking now. And so I've been not only working on my own solo stuff for Goatee, but then I also have speaking gigs that I'm going out to do, which is kind of a niche thing that has naturally evolved that I did not expect, which is kind of a
Mm.
combination of a keynote talk bookended with music, So I'll sing a couple songs and do a keynote talk. And
Okay, tell me about that content wise, like topic wise, like what are your things that
yep.
you're
I mean, honestly, probably
sharing?
80% of my time, yeah, is taken up by speaking at events that are usually non-profit fundraisers, some of them for marriage and family organizations. There are a lot of pro-life organizations who love to hear my story because Bowen had such a difficult diagnosis, and we were highly encouraged to end that pregnancy.
Is that right?
Yeah, basically us sharing and celebrating just what God has done with this little boy's life through adversity. He's one of those kids that's like touched so many people's hearts. And so I've shared his story in a way that has really made a lot of organizations that work with expecting parents who are unsure if they want to move forward with their pregnancy. A lot of these ministries will have me come share Bowen's story and how we chose life and the amazing things that God's done, in our family because of him.
Can you
Yeah.
give me a version of that? Because I don't know the story.
Yeah, yeah. So when Bowen was born in 2010, it was the same time that Lead Me was number one on the radio, and I tell you about some of that
Mm.
tension. But he had his first open heart surgery just 5 days after he was born. The first night of his first surgery, had a moment where for about 45 minutes he was practically being kept alive by a nurse pumping his heart uh, in front of us. His chest was wide open after surgery because they had taken the patch off. They called us in the middle of the night, tell us to come because he had coded, which he had a heart attack. His heart stopped. We show up and this nurse literally has her fingers between the walls of his chest on his heart, just pumping it
Oh,
while they're trying to just save his life. And so for about 45 minutes, we just cried and prayed, and they allowed us to be in there at the bottom of the bed while they were trying to save his life. And they ended up pulling us away from his bedside, and we really thought he was gone. Thank God the doctors were able to get him on life support. And they came back in that room after we had thought that he had passed and told us that he was still alive. And they had gotten him on basically a bypass system that allowed him to buy some time in hopes that they could figure out the problem. And sure enough, we ended up being able to work through it, and the doctors did a fantastic job. The Lord provided a miracle for us. We still have Bowen 14 years later after 3 open heart surgeries. So he had 2 in the first year, and he had another surgery just before he turned 9 years old when he was 8. And we actually have a documentary about that process.
Okay.
That we made called Bowen's Heart, that we made to help other families that are walking through similar situations.
Link in description.
Yep.
Okay, so how's he doing now?
So he's doing fantastic. He's 14. We released some music before his last surgery when he was 8 years old. Seth Mosley helped, and Steve Fee and some friends of mine helped produce some songs to put out for him. And so it's kind of funny because you can actually find him on Spotify or Apple or whatever, Amazon. I don't know where people listen
When
to
you say
music these
him,
days.
like as in
Yeah,
him.
Bowen Hammitt. Yeah, you can find Bowen Hammitt on those.
Wow.
Those. Yeah, he's got a couple songs that actually turned out really cool.
With him singing?
Yeah, with him singing on them. Yeah.
Before the surgery.
Yeah, there's actually a version of Mercy Me Bart singing with him on one of them. And so, because they're a family that really supported us through all that. It's really been interesting just to see what God's done with his life. So because of that, those stories and us kind of enduring what that, not only Bowen surviving his heart surgeries, but also Sarah and I being very honest about the toll that took on our marriage at the time, how difficult it was for us to deal with grief, to deal together as we grieved in different ways. That stuff became a really powerful source of encouragement for us.
Explain what that grief's about.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, your kid survived.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the grief about?
Yep. So when he was going through his open heart surgeries, especially in the first year, both times we didn't know if he would survive. So we had been through this form of trauma, being in that room while this was happening, thinking he had died. And then I would say some of the peripheral trauma that you experience when you have a child in a hospital for that long is you watch other kids die. And no one really prepared us for that either. You're doing life with all these other families and you're fighting for your own child's life, but then you're also watching families walk away from the hospital empty-handed. Kids that you knew and are passing. And so there was just a lot of really raw pain and emotion in that season. And Sarah really dealt with that pain by fighting 24/7 at Bowen's bedside, always there, would only leave if she was made to leave. Her heart and mind were fully devoted to how do I, as a mother, make sure I'm doing everything I can do to help my child survive. And so I felt very much alone in the process of trying to know, as a creative person, deal with the emotion and pain of, and I didn't know where my place was because she was so right up front fighting every moment that it was like I almost didn't even know how to get in there to do that. I was thinking, what can I do as protector, provider, as dad, as husband? And so kind of how I could use my gifts is I kind of rallied a team of people around us. I would blog about what was happening. I'd ask people to pray for us. And crazy enough, I mean, that I had no idea how many people would rally around us and pray and follow our story. At one point, I think we had over 1 million people visit our blog.
Goodness.
Yeah. I would go in the afternoon and I would take some time and I would write an update for people. And she felt like, well, how can you even think about anything but just being here with us, next to us? How can you even walk away for an hour or two? Or, I'm thinking, I'm processing, I'm doing something I feel I can do that's helpful. And so, and I felt like, well, how can you not step away and be a wife to me? Or how can, our relationship not matter during this time, that we're not processing, we're not talking, we're not dealing with this grief together. And for her, she felt like there wasn't time for that. So she felt it was selfish for me to ask her to go on a walk or go out to lunch or but when you're in the hospital for months, I'm thinking, how do we connect? And it just felt like there was no way, and the two different ways that we were dealing and processing our grief for us to connect. There are some studies that show between 70 and 80% of couples who have chronically ill children divorce for these very reasons, not knowing how to deal with the grief and grieve together. They grieve separately, and those become sources of contention.
So interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got Crohn's disease and autism in one child.
Wow.
That moment when you realize
Yes.
that's what's happening, and it explains things.
Yeah.
And the difference of processing. Yeah, that's good.
And I think that helped us though too when he went into his third surgery when he was 8, for us to reflect back on those times and say, hey, these are the mistakes we made before. How do we meet each other in our grief this time around, as we don't know if our son will survive this? If he doesn't survive somehow, how do we survive? And even if he does, how do we survive that time of the surgery and the recovery? And we were able to reflect and use that, what we had seen before, to actually bring us together stronger through his third surgery. So
that's good.
the reason we made the film is to kind of help other families watch how we walked through it and what we've learned, and speak very candidly about it.
I will have to be checking that out.
Yeah.
So that's what the speaking is primarily based around.
So when I speak, I've got, like I always say, it's like building blocks, right? There's always a couple building blocks that are of my talks that revolve around my Lead Me story, which is the song Lead Me that was written out of me and my experience as a husband and father. That's what my book is based on, even though Bowen's story is also in the book. So those are the building blocks: my marriage and family story of me learning to be a better husband and father, and the challenges I've faced. And then also the challenges we faced as parents of a chronically ill child with heart disease. And so those are the two kind of main blocks that I'll pull from. But depending on what I do, I'll craft, original blocks as well. So like I just spoke, this is really give you an interesting view of like what 1 week might look like for me. I spoke at a national conference for directors of pregnancy centers across the country. So I spoke in front of 1,200 directors and their staff at this Heartbeat International conference. And so I tailored a big part of that to speak directly to where they're at. But then the next week I spoke at a statewide Virginia homeschool conference. So I'm sharing my story, but I'm definitely building pieces of those messages to fit whatever I'm speaking to very specifically and intentionally.
Tasha Layton's husband,
Keith
Everett.
Yes.
So Keith speaking here, we reflected on how, band members often on the road. I'm not talking necessarily the lead singer, but band members and crew, it's this job. You get up, you load the gear and you do the stuff, you get back in the bus, you go. For me, as somebody in the studio, I feel like sometimes I'm a bricklayer. Am I laying Christian bricks? They're just bricks. It's a kick drum, a snare drum, but hearing the life change stories brings it to a whole other place and helps keep me positive. I'm just wondering, are there any that strike you that you've heard along the way, like people's lives that have changed from songs you've written?
Partly because I still sing the song Lead Me whenever I speak. I hear an exceptional amount of stories about that song even still. Probably the one story that stands out to me the most of all stories about all songs is a story about the song Lead Me. There's a woman that told me she had been involved in an emotional affair for many months, and she was about to leave her house to go meet this guy for the first time at a hotel, and to take the affair to the next level. And she said, as she was walking out the back door of her house, Lead Me came on the radio. And she said, in that moment, I'm guessing she had heard the song before, so she knew what it was about. But in that moment, she said that song grabbed her heart in such a way that she ended up like falling to her knees, weeping, texting this guy, telling him that she never wanted to see him again or talk to him again, confessed to her husband and restored her marriage.
Wow.
Those kind of stories you hear, you're like, that is so much bigger than I could ever imagine.
Absolutely.
God could use a little 4-minute song to do. We had a couple who had been divorced, and they both separately had heard the song Lead Me, and it had done something in their hearts to cause them to move back toward each other, and they ended up getting remarried, and that's not everybody's story, of course, and not everybody gets that ending, but man, when you get to hear those stories about how that song was used.
I love that.
Oh,
thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
It does lead me naturally to the next topic, because my podcast that's coming out in the morning is Jessica Morris.
Okay.
Do you know that name? She is the reporter who broke the Tait story.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So that's coming out in the morning.
Wow.
So I just edited it yesterday. I'm still confused.
Yeah, me
in
too.
some ways.
Yeah, me too.
But my big...
Well, yeah, and it's hard to talk about. Because people will take anything you say, and they will take one piece of it, and they will, potentially use it for their own agenda wherever they're coming from. So it is very hard to talk about.
There's so many people who are disaffected.
Yes.
I see some of these forums online where people are just brutal. She has been very positively affected by Christian music in her life. I may have been spared some of the negativity. Not totally. There's a few moments here and there where I think to myself, that's an unhealthy thing that person's getting into.
Yeah.
What I do like about the discussion is that, and kind of where I'm coming to is see something, say something.
Absolutely.
Like if somebody had worked with Michael 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And not just avoided it. I'm interested what kind of reaction you got to your post, which I may insert into this, by the way, because I think it's really good.
So I just can't escape this pull, this feeling that I should say something about what's happened in the Christian music industry over the past couple of weeks. Some of the news that's come out about moral failure and people who've been hurt. And my initial reaction is probably really similar to many people out there, which is heartbreak and sadness over what I've seen. But on the heels of that, I've also seen some people trickling through my feed who are kind of trashing Christian music as a whole. People who are saying there's tons of artists living double lives. I even saw a headline from someone saying they hope the entire Christian music industry crumbles, which is just totally ridiculous. Every genre, every business, every industry, every church, every organization that has humans will have people fail. That's not an excuse for what happened. But what I want to say is that I've been in this industry for 25 years. I toured with Sanctus for 20. I've been writing music in this industry for a long time. I have close community with a lot of people in this industry. And along the way, I've seen a handful of people fail. I've seen people go through dark seasons where God has restored them. But the majority of people I have known all along the way love God, love people, got into this for the right reasons, and continue to pursue to live what they preach. And so I just want to encourage the person out there who's like, is this whole industry just a sham? Absolutely not. I think the world, as much as ever, needs Christian music, needs people lifting up the name of Jesus, shining a light, lifting their spirits through song. And I'm still excited about what God has been and is up to in Christian music. And I just wanted to encourage somebody out there with that. Maybe there's somebody out there who that's not their experience, but that's my experience. And so I wanted to encourage you with it, that God's still doing great things in the industry, and that we should just continue to pray for the people who've been hurt.
I'm interested what kind of reaction you got to your post.
The majority of the reactions I got were positive. People saying, hey, thanks for clarifying this. People who had wondered, is this really just an industry-wide problem? Are tons of artists living double lives? And that was really why I had posted it. Because I think I walked into making that post assuming that there was an obvious thing in the room, right? It was obvious that what happened was egregious, that people were sad, that people were heartbroken. I kind of just went in assuming hey, we all agree on that one thing, that our hearts feel horrible, not only for these people whose lives were changed and the victims of some of the more egregious things that we had not known about. peripherally, so many people being affected by this story, even outside of the people that came forward. I think the heartbreak and sadness, I assumed that was kind of like just a given. I think the thing that didn't seem obvious to me was the question that kept being asked that was not obvious to so many people. And that question was, well, so-and-so said everybody knew. And so-and-so says, this is just the Christian music industry pretty much as a whole. I felt like almost a responsibility to address and answer to what people were wanting answered from my experience over 25 years, which was, yes, let's acknowledge that we're all heartbroken. We're all surprised by the story that came out. But I wanted to answer the question, is Christian music systemically corrupt? Does abuse or sexual abuse or cocaine, abuse run through the veins of Christian music? I just felt like I wanted to make sure, like encourage people whose lives have been so uplifted and changed by Christian music in so many positive ways, just to be a voice that's nobody's saying anything here. Like, let me say, hey, like, let me encourage you that this is not what I have seen over the 25 years. Like you said, yes, there are times where you're like, something smells a little fishy over there, or something like doesn't seem quite right over here. Maybe you don't totally know the whole story. Sometimes you hear stories about things that happen that make you sad or make you angry over the course of time. But those stories have been so few and far between of the amount of wonderful people that I've had the opportunity to do life with, who really love God and love people. I really believe have had the heart and intention of making music that shares the gospel, shines the light of Jesus in a world that desperately needs it. And I did feel a responsibility to just tell people like, hey, like not everybody knew. No, now did everybody, who is everybody, first of all?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like along the years, I had heard like little rumors of substance abuse or things that like you don't know if they're true, but you hear about rehab, and you're charitable to people because you go, gosh, somebody goes to the darkest moment of their life and then they're getting help for that problem as far as you know. You're not just going to go scream about it from your platform. But I do think you're right. The problem that it really leads us to is what you said, is to see something, say something. The question that we have to ask is, how was the deep and darker revelations of the story kept secret for so long? How many times did this happen? How often was it happening? Why did people feel like they couldn't speak up?
I think that's the big question. And that's what Jessica actually is like. These people have had these stories for years and years and years. And the fear, this is her word, not mine, because I'm not sure I agree with this, but she says the fear that these people have is that if they come forward with this, they will no longer be allowed to work in Christian music.
Yeah, which may be true. A byproduct, right? Or a consequence of, I shouldn't even speak to whether or not that's true. I don't know if that's true. It could be, could not be. We don't know. That's a hypothesis, right?
It is.
There was one person who commented on my post who had been personally hurt by the Christian music industry, who had said she'd walked with a lot of other people who've been hurt. Her view is coming from her world and whatever she walked. And my heart really went out to her because I think she pointed out that maybe it's because I was an artist that I was shielded from what it felt like to be someone who was smaller and someone who maybe was at the what she would consider the lower end of the spectrum of work, right?
Right.
Not being on stage, not being someone whose voice, maybe you feel like your voice doesn't matter when you're just a stagehand or an assistant. I do understand that feeling of how seductive at first, and then how harmful the idea of power can possibly be. And I do think there's something there. Then I think that has been addressed and through different cultural movements. I think there are some toxic conversations that happen around it, and there's some very good conversations that happen around it. And I think the good side of that is going, how do you make people who experience pain, legitimate pain, like these people who came out in this article, or sexual assault, especially.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you make those people feel like their voice matters enough to be able to be heard? I don't know if it's a natural feeling of fear. The Bible says that everything in this life is a spiritual war. I believe that.
Me too.
You know, what voices are speaking to the fears, saying, hey, live in shame, live in silence. Nobody will believe you. You know, it must be horrible to be feeling that way and living with those secrets and living with that pain and feel like you'll be the one ostracized if you speak up. There are some real questions that should be asked about how are these things suppressed? How does more honesty and truth come to light? What does that look like? I don't know.
I'm at the point where I'm like, you have a story
Yeah.
that the pain you're carrying,
Yes.
you can tell me privately. We want to hear this and we do something about it.
Yes.
You know,
exactly.
correct the situation some way. I think especially for survivors of SA, if they're heard and believed, there is, you know, a way forward for them. I've never experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
And I do think dry tours,
Yeah.
road pastors, there are certain things we can do
Absolutely.
to mitigate the possibility of any of that.
I do love when people bring road pastors out. I feel like some of the healthiest bands that I ever saw on tour always had some sort of pastor. I mean, I always appreciated the fact that like Winter Jam tour always brought Bobby out and always had him out there ministering to people along the way and shepherding people and inviting people into building their faith journey on the road as collectively.
The tour members.
Yes, the tour members together walking as brothers and sisters as a church. Even so, man, it's like if someone is going to hide things, then they're going to hide things. And there's only so much you can do.
If alcohol was not present.
Yes.
And I'm not an abolitionist by any stretch. But I do know that my sober mind and my resolution in my sober mind is completely weakened.
Yes. Yes.
When you put alcohol in the scenario.
For sure.
Yeah. So
that's
I'm
a hard one, man. Yeah.
I'm getting more hardcore on the dry tours other way from the day the bus leaves.
Absolutely.
Not even on off days of the trouble days.
Well, I'll tell you, it was, I've seen that more and more be emphasized and spoken on the front end of tours. I was just out with Kirk Cameron. We did, I think it was like 18 city of tour over the course of a few weeks. And that was right up front. Absolutely nobody, no crew, nobody on tour. As long as you're out on the road on tour with, at the time it was a Strong Family, Strong Communities tour, zero alcohol.
And so zero tolerance.
Yeah, zero tolerance.
Yeah.
And it was stated up front, like while you're on this tour, if you consume alcohol, they basically said you'll be asked to leave. Like, dude, bring it on. You know, like
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, no problem with that at all. I think you're right that especially in that context of touring, just being away from home. There have been 2 tours that I've been on. They were just short tours over the past year that have right up front said, hey, while you're on this tour, it's completely dry. I have a high respect for that.
I think that bookers, promoters, people don't want this happening in their church.
Yeah.
And so the customer needs to drive that.
Yes.
As the ethos and, require it of the tours that come to their churches.
I want to say one more thing really quick about the Tait thing. I think for me, I had no idea that coming out to just address the questions people had about whether that was systemic through the whole Christian music industry would make some people feel like I didn't care about the victims. Yeah. I basically got people saying like, you're just defending the industry. You don't care about the victims. I thought it was obvious to everyone that we cared about the victims. Yeah. I mean, even my opening statement, hey, I'm heartbroken. I was heartbroken for these victims and everybody who's hurt by this, but it was funny. That was the one thing I was surprised by because I set out intentionally just to clarify a question that so many people were asking. But it was almost like what they wanted to hear was me focus on something else. And because I didn't, it was like, well, you don't care about this. That was what I was most surprised.
Well, I think there's extreme emotion.
Yeah.
And so it's like just burn the house down, throw out everything. It's just not a good response.
Mike Downey said it great. Like you can hold 2 things at one time.
Right.
Right. You can hold that we are all heartbroken about what happened. And we can also hold that not everybody's bad because of it. We can hold both things,
Yeah.
and it's hard to hold many things at one time, especially if you're wounded in a particular area that really affects your lens and how you can see things in general.
What are you doing that you want people to know about? This is my final question.
I'm really excited right now about some of the music I'm about to put out with Goatee Records. So as a solo artist, a new single called Days God Gave. We haven't set the release date yet. We're working on a little video and the cover right now, but we'll set a release date probably for the next couple months. But another project that's been really fun for me to work on has been a rock band called Low Cloud. Me and my buddy Nick DePartie, who used to be a touring guitar player for Cutlass, and then one of the former members of Sanctus Real, who played with us for the last 6 years that I was in the band. He played bass, Jake Rye. The three of us.
Jake Rye?
Yeah, and he's a mix engineer as well.
Yeah.
Yep, and a producer. So the three of us have been making music together as Low Cloud, and it has been so fun to throw back to like the early 2000s style and just kind of write and make the kind of music that got us into music to begin with. People can check that out wherever they listen to music. We're actually playing a few music festivals this summer.
So you've actually released music people can find
on
Spotify
Yeah. We've
as
got 5. We're about to put our 6th song out. So we've got 5 out now. The 6th is about to drop. And so we're just...
And it's purely indie.
Yeah. Total indie rock. So, hey, I was going to say too, I just put out a second part of a program that I built for a national pro-life organization. It's an organization called Save the Storks. Kind of a funny name, but they do a lot of great work.
Yes, I've heard of them.
Great work in the pro-life space and caring for mothers and children and even dads. And so I've built their fatherhood program called Dare to be a Dad. And we put out a short curriculum. Well, it's not less of a curriculum, more of like resources for dads to reach into their hearts and walk them through just some of the things that men and fathers deal with. So I had a booklet and a video series I produced, but then we just did a text campaign. So a 30-day dad challenge where dads receive videos and challenges for 30 days to help strengthen their relationship with their kids. So people can check that out at daretobeadad.org.
Daretobeadad.org. Okay, we're going to link that in the description as well. Matt, thanks for coming, man.
Yeah,
I always
absolutely.
finish. This is my tradition. It's the handshake.
I love it, man. Great.
Hey, thanks for listening. That was Matt Hammitt. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are enjoying this, maybe consider sharing some of it to your socials. Help other people either in the business or just in their lives to find some of the inspiration from some of these amazing quality guests that I've been very blessed to have. There'll be new episodes every Thursday. Make sure you're putting good audio in your ear holes. Over and out.